Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa Coleman, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation at NYU, and I use she and her pronouns. I hope that everyone is taking very good care. We are thrilled to welcome you to Transformation Talks, where we spotlight leaders to learn from their journeys and gain knowledge about how to be agents working toward transformational change across our organizations. In the Office of Global Inclusion, we engage global diversity and inclusion principles with an intersectional focus on nimbleness, inclusivity, resilience, transformation, growth mindsets, design thinking, and adaptivity in all of our work. Transformation Talks is part of NYU's Be Together initiative centered on innovating, acting, and transforming as a community together. Today, we have the distinct honor to welcome Professor Deborah Archer. Hello, how are you today, Professor Archer?
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here today. Professor Deborah Archer is a professor of clinical law and co-director of the Center on Race and Inequality in the Law at the NYU School of Law. Professor Archer is also the president of the American Civil Liberties Union and a leading expert in civil rights, civil liberties, and racial justice. She is an award-winning teacher and legal scholar whose articles have appeared in leading law reviews. Professor Archer has also offered commentary for numerous media outlets, including MSNBC, National Public Radio, CBS, Monocle, The Atlantic, and, of course, the New York Times. She's a graduate of the Yale School of Law, where she was awarded the Charles G. Album Prize and Smith College. She previously worked as an attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union and the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, Inc., where she litigated in the voting rights areas and employment discrimination, as well as school desegregation. She is also a former chair of the American Association of Law School section on civil rights and the selection on minority groups. She previously served as the chair of the New York City Civilian Compliant Review Board, the nation's largest police oversight agency. Professor Archer has been honored by numerous community organizations and legal institutions, including Yale Law School, Columbia Law School, Boston University School of Law, NYU, Smith College, New York Law School, the American Association of Law Schools, and the Law and Society Association. In 2021, the Law and Society Association awarded her with the John Hope Franklin Prize, honorable mention for her article, White Men's Road Through Black Men's Homes, Advancing Racial Equity Through Highway Reconstruction, which appeared in the Vanderbilt Law Review. She has also received a 2021 Podell Distinguished Teaching Award, the 2020-21 Jacob K. Javits Professorship from New York University, the 2021 Stephen Ellman Memorial Clinical Scholarship Award from the American Association of Law Schools, the Otto L. Walter Distinguished Writing Award from the New York Law School, and the Hayward Burns Shannara Gilbert Award from the Northeast People of Color Legal Scholarship Conference. Can we just say, of course, we are so delighted and just thrilled not only to have you here with us today, you as a member of our NYU School of Law faculty. Thank you for being with us here today, Professor Archer.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump right into the questions because people want to hear from you. So I'd like to begin, as I do with each one of our guests that we are featuring as part of this Transformation Talk series. As an accomplished and respected leader and change agent, which obviously your bio demonstrates just some of the tremendous work that you've been able to do. How do you define success, progress, and transformation as you think about, your work within the context of law, civil rights, and this important work on racial equity?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is surprisingly a challenging question, I think, in the context of my work, fighting to protect and expand civil rights and racial justice. A professor here at the law school who's since passed, Professor Derek Bell, wrote about the permanence of racism and that racism infects every element of American life. It's just foundational. So I don't know that we can define success in the sense of an achievable goal as eradicating racism or inequality. So for my work, I think the success is the progress. The success is the fight. It's the everyday victories that help bring someone closer to living a choice-filled life. It's the work of helping to establish a right that was not recognized before. And success is helping to dismantle the architecture, I think, of inequality piece by piece. And I've had to internalize that success isn't linear, which I think is a very core American way of viewing success. It actually happens in civil rights in fits and starts. Progress is always met with retrenchment, and we're seeing that now. Martin Luther King Jr. said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Sometimes I think that it's not even an arc. It's just a series of loops. Success can be taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. If you are prepared for that step back and to lessen the impact of that step back so that it doesn't take you all the way back, I think that's success. You want to keep those loops moving forward. I think in many ways, it's like diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work that you do, the important work that you do. You don't get to a point where you say, okay, we're a diverse organization, our work is done, right? It's something you have to keep on working with every day to get to equity, to get to inclusion, to maintain that work. So in my work, I don't think there's an endpoint at which we claim success. At the end of the day, I'm going to call it success if my children don't have to worry after their children the same way I have to worry about them, and they don't have to fight the same fights that I fought. My work is about forcing us to grapple with who we are as a country and pushing us to get better year after year, decade after decade, and generation after generation.
Thank you so much. And thank you for saying that last part, especially about, right, it may be different fights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not the same fights. And that it's, and I think it's so important for our emerging leaders to think about, right, leadership is not linear. It really isn't. And the fits and starts that you talked about. And I love that loop. I love the idea of loops. So thank you so much. Really just appreciate that. So let's talk now a little bit about, as you mentioned, right, I'm at the work in terms of what we do in our Office of Global Inclusion. We really try to think about this work, and it isn't about, the end point, but it's about the progress. So tell us a little bit about, as you think about working toward that progress and thinking about supporting the development of global leaders, right, which I know you do in all of your work. Tell us a little bit about what you think are some of the core strengths, skills, or leadership qualities, right, that enable a leader to grow and remain, right, both and agile, but also able to do the things that you're talking about, right, to start and stop and to think about the architecture of inequality, to lessen the impact, right? Tell us, how do you get there? Because I imagine that's not easy to get. In fact, I know it's not easy to get there, so.
Yeah, and it's harder to do that kind of work that's so personal to who you are, right? We're not fighting for some abstract concept. We're fighting for our lives. And I think racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, and all of those things work in part by getting you to internalize messages of incompetence and inferiority, by getting you to believe that you belong outside of opportunity, that you're not cut out for leadership. So I think a core strength and a constant challenge for me is learning to overcome that voice by doing, even when you're not confident that you can do it. Don't talk yourself out of stepping up to the challenge and to the opportunity. And also to take steps to ensure that you have access to the resources, opportunities, feedback, and support to be ready to take on any challenge and seize every opportunity. In terms of core skills, I'll mention understanding the need to identify and break apart unjust systems, not just address individual acts or manifestations of inequality. This requires us as advocates fighting for civil rights and racial justice to focus on systems and power, and to gain a deeper understanding of the complexity of the problems faced by impacted communities, to work with them, right, to envision justice, and to work with them to fight for a more just future. The problems are entrenched, they're complex, they're systemic. I often find that when I'm working with students or younger lawyers, they think that there's just one lever to pull to fix a problem. They could just find the policing lever, they would pull that. If they could follow the segregation lever, they would pull that. But instead, we need to have skills to break apart those systems and find out where there are opportunities for advocacy. If I had to describe the core leadership qualities that I think I have that have helped to make me successful in a range of leadership roles, I would say first that it's grounded in passion for the issues in the work. For me, it started with personal experiences with racism and economic inequality, but it doesn't have to be for everyone as long as the passion and dedication is there. I think my approach to leadership is in large part leadership through service, to be of service to the organization, to communities, to people I work with. I approach my work as a leader thinking and asking, what can I do to help? I think an important leadership quality is to try to focus on being a bridge, making sure that people are in conversation with each other when they need to be, and facilitating those conversations. I recognize as someone who does not always speak up right away, or who doesn't always feel comfortable speaking up in large groups. I'm a shy person. People don't want to believe that. I know that there are many people who have contributions to make and would in a setting that allows it. So I think broadly about voices to seek out and to finding as many alternative ways to engage them as possible. I have a collaborative approach to leadership. I try to be inclusive. Sometimes that means leading out front and gathering the support and resources that I need to be successful in that role. And sometimes that means leading from behind the scenes and making sure that other people have the opportunity to be out front and that they have the support that they need to be successful. And finally, I would say as a leader, I pay close attention to process as a really critical component of leadership. In the end, smart people can disagree about the outcome or ultimate decision that was made, but process, I think, is really important to making sure that everyone feels that the end result was fair and that their voices were heard.
Thank you so much for such a comprehensive answer. And I want to go back and just say a couple of things about where you started, because I think it is so hard. We receive so many messages, right? And so many of those messages are less than positive for a lot of us. So just talking about, right, that idea of doing when and what you can, even sometimes when you're not sure that you can do it. But as you said, getting the right supports around you. Yeah. Right, to enable you to actually be able to do that. So I had to come back to that because that is just so core and I think so important. And we have so many young people out there and emerging leaders listening to these talks. So, yeah, and the co-creation part that you said, right, creating with, not for, with.
Yeah.
Again,
sometimes I don't have confidence in myself, but you just have to have confidence in the people who have confidence in you. I have done things because other people have told me, no, you are ready, even when I didn't feel like it. You got to believe. You've
got to believe. You really, really do. And I think, this, and I think making space for others is so important to the collaboration part that you talked about, so that then actually you are able to co-create. You are able to find those people who can be supportive. I can't obviously summarize all of the things that you said, but I will say this from one fellow introvert to another. It's hard sometimes because people don't know who the introverts are, right? But I think that's exactly right. And sometimes introverts have to go in the front, but also know how to, right, then make that other space. So thank you for talking about that. I think that's important for people to know, especially as people read your bio and hear you speak. They would not know that at all. So, so let's talk a little bit now about your leadership journey.
Mhm.
Okay, so one of the things that I love about higher education and transgenerational engagement, it's probably the reason that I stay in higher education and always have, is because I love working across the generations, right? And I love this idea of co-creation and imagining the future together. So I have a dear friend, and one of her questions that she asks when she thinks about, she works with 8-year-olds, and she says, "What was your 8-year-old self think of you today?" And so I say, my 8-year-old self didn't imagine myself in the way that I am today. I mean, my 8-year-old self didn't know a lot about the world in some ways. So tell us a little bit about your journey, right? And tell us a little bit about, as you think about the arc of your career, some of the things that you are most proud of, some of the things that you've overcome as you think about that 8-year-old self, right? Is she like, wow? Is she like, so talk to us a little bit about that journey, if you will.
Yeah, I think my 50-year-old self sometimes just like, what? Right, and is shocked. And so my 8-year-old self would be amazed at what I have been able to accomplish. And I think I've had a lot to overcome, a lot because our systems, especially when I was growing up, were not designed to support and empower people like me. I'm the first person in my family graduate from college. I'm a first generation American citizen, and our systems were just not set up for me to succeed. And on top of that, not my 8-year-old self, but my 9 and 10-year-old self. We had just moved to a new town in Connecticut, out of Hartford, Connecticut, where we lived in a poor community, wasn't safe, didn't have access to high quality education. My parents were able to move us to a new town so that I could attend better schools, so my siblings and I could have a safer home. And it was a predominantly white community. And when we got there, they let us know that we weren't welcome. And I remember being 9 or 10 and waking up to find that KKK had been painted on our house and our car. And for some time, I was terrified. I was scared to be in our house. I was scared to be in our neighborhood, to walk our streets. I was scared to go to school. And so I think my 8, 9, 10-year-old self would be proud that I was able to overcome that fear, but also to do work that makes it so that other 8, 9, and 10-year-old students may not have to deal with what I had to deal with. I'm also proud, you mentioned the transgenerational engagement. I am proud of the work that I have done with students, proud that I have mentored, taught, worked with, or supervised students who are now leaders in their own right. They're leaders who are fearless and kind and creative and determined. They are bringing a focus on justice and equity to everything they do. And they are mentoring those who are coming after them. And I work really hard to try to create an environment where my students or new lawyers that I work with and advocates feel comfortable and supported to rise to the next level. So when I hear students and colleagues after a year or after 10 years, that they spent, the time they spent with me was meaningful to them, or that my work impacted them in a way that they are still benefiting from today, it reminds me why I wanted to teach and why I do what I want to do. I think the struggle to defend the Constitution, to defend our rights, as we said, it never ends. And perhaps the only constant is in our history is that the work to make the Constitution more than words is never ending. Our struggle is that the struggle will depend on people who not only have the smarts and skills to defend the Constitution, but it's also going to depend on people with good hearts who will lead, who will guide, who will support, who will inspire others to do what's right. And when I see the amazing work my former students and former attorneys I have worked with are doing, it helps reaffirm that I'm doing what I need to do, that this is the right place for me.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And thank you for talking to us, for again reminding us, and you talked about this earlier in your responses about systems and power, and those systems and power that are at work And far too often we think those, some people think those things only happened, I guess, in the 18th, 19th, whatever centuries and 1960s and all, I don't know, people like to go back somewhere. I don't know where they go. Thanks to you for reminding us that these things are still very much relevant to communities, to neighborhoods, and how people can get treated and mistreated, right? And all of the things that can happen. And also for talking about the work that you do to make it better for the next generations of 9 and 10-year-olds. I think it's just so important. So let's move to the next question, which is really and so okay, so we talk a lot about in our office a lot about innovation, right? And the future of work, future readiness, and there's all this focus, as you know, around the next generations, globalization, all of the things when we think about even in the U.S. So can you talk to us a little bit about, in your leadership roles as the co-director of the Center on Race and Equality and the president of the American Civil Liberties Union, what role do you see, right, these ideas of innovation, et cetera, playing in your work, and the links, right, to the important issues of global diversity, equity, inclusion, in terms of the work that you do?
Yeah. Again, I think that's a really hard question. How does an organization like the ACLU that's been around for over 100 years be an organization that is ready to rise to whatever challenge to justice and equality surfaces? You can't predict the particular challenges, but need to build an organization that is built for unseen challenges, new tools and new opportunities, and have those folks as part of your team, folks who are ready to step up and take advantage of those opportunities. Same thing with NYU. Every year, how do we continue to evolve and innovate? I think creativity and innovation in our work as advocates and being creative problem solvers is incredibly important. It is important to understand the current legal framework for equality and develop the ability to utilize that framework creatively on behalf of clients and communities and movements. But it's also important to be able to transcend and reimagine those current institutional frameworks, to adapt those frameworks to new challenges, to embrace different avenues for relief, to create new narratives, and to really pull together the building blocks of a new legal framework that's going to help us establish rights that didn't exist before. I try to tell my students all the time, you cannot feel limited by traditional ways of viewing law, advocacy, and equality. Forget how I view those things. I'm trying to give you tools so that you can re-envision them, to pick up where I left off and go further and farther. Far too often, we use tools that are too small or too narrow for the problems of inequality we're facing. Octavia Butler said there's nothing new under the sun, but there are new suns. And so the work ahead of us is to discover those new suns as we fight for racial justice, as we fight for economic justice, as we fight for civil rights.
Well, thank you, first of all, for quoting Octavia Butler. Also, really, as you started the answer to this question and talking about teams and creativity and collaboration and really thinking about reimagination, right, for the clients and reimagining current legal frameworks. And that goes back to some of the things that you also talked about earlier about the knowledge of the constitutional law and the ways in which you think about the inequities of the past and how that influences even our current situations, which is back to this notion of systems.
Yeah.
I can't, and there's something else that you said that I'm wondering if you could just expand on, and this is sort of outside of, and hopefully we'll be able to get some of this in, is as you were talking, I was thinking about the work, I was thinking about Crenshaw's work on intersectionality, right? And you've been talking about, so we talk about intersectionality mostly through Crenshaw's work in this intersection of identities, right? So thinking about race, sex, et cetera. But as you were talking about the law, and in particular, how sometimes legal frameworks are too small and narrow, right? Which is exactly what Crenshaw was saying, the framework is too small and narrow. Could you just talk a little bit more about how you think about reimagining, right? Or the reimagining work to reimagine new legal frameworks that are broader, because I think that some of the ways in which some of the people who are going to be listening to this, right, are going to be emerging leaders in the law, and they're going to want to know, well, what are some of the things I can take up and do and think about that. So if you could just expand your answer just a little bit there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it links pretty directly in some ways, in some respects, to Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality work that you mentioned. We have a body of law that deals with employment discrimination, for example, and we have cases that help us understand and challenge discrimination on the basis of race. We have a body of law and cases that help us understand and challenge discrimination based on gender. But what happens, for example, as a Black woman? You may have a boss who is discriminating against you because you are a Black woman based on stereotypes and misunderstandings and just downright prejudice. But the law says because they're hiring Black men that you can't prove your case, or the law says because they're hiring other women, you can't prove your case. And so it requires innovation to think about how can I push and transform the law to address the fact that there's specific special discrimination that applies to Black women. It means that we have to think about what our goal is. During Plessy versus Ferguson, a goal was integration. A goal was after Brown versus Education, again, integration, getting access to traditionally white spaces. But now that we have a framework for helping people to get access to traditionally white spaces, there are new fights. We're making sure that there are equity within those spaces. How do we ensure that there is still equitable access even in those spaces? How do we protect people more broadly in those spaces? And how are we protecting traditionally Black and brown spaces? Making sure that those communities are built up, that people in those communities have the resources, power, access, opportunity to thrive within their own environments. What does it mean to be engaged in work for community equity? There are new challenges. As we progress, we see the new hurdles, and we have to think about how to overcome those hurdles as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you for expanding on that answer. So our last question, I can't believe we've come to the end of this conversation, but given your leadership journey, could you share a piece of advice that you wish you had been given, or something, talk about something that sustains you, and or talk about something that sustains you or gives you joy? And we ask this question because as we know, sometimes people have struggles along the leadership journey. So something that you wish you had known that would help to keep you just sort of going, or things that help keep you going today.
Yeah. So first, I would say my advice I give to people is to show up and act like you belong, because you do belong. I literally have a Post-it behind my computer that I put up the day that I arrived at NYU that says, act like you belong, because you do. I have to remind myself of that because there are too many forces at play in this country, generally and more broadly, to try to convince me that I don't belong. The other thing I would say is don't expect perfection from yourself. One of my favorite gospel songs says, we fall down, but we get up. So I start by showing myself some grace. Everybody makes mistakes. I have made plenty of mistakes. I will make plenty more mistakes. But what I can tell you is I learn from my mistakes. And what matters, I think, is not whether we make mistakes, but how we recover from it. Are you going to learn from it? Are you going to take responsibility for any impact it has? If I make a mistake, I own it. I apologize for it. I would take responsibility for the impact. And I will never make the same mistake again. But most importantly, I will not let any past mistake hold me back from taking advantage of new opportunities to grow and advance and lead. And then I just want to say, these can be tiring times. Take the time, the space to take care of yourself. Remember that there is always going to be retrenchment after advance. It's the way of history. It ebbs and it flows. And we just need to make sure that we are healthy, we are well, we are strong, so that we can be engaged in this fight for the long term.
I love it. Act like we belong, learn from our mistakes, grow, show grace to self, be accountable and grow. And of course, it ebbs and flows. And it will continue to do so. Thank you so much for being with us here today. This has been just a terrific conversation. I hope you all out there have enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you so much, Professor Archer, for your insights and for talking with us about your own leadership journey and sharing with us some of your, not just your work, but some of your personal insights.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
So we hope that you will follow the Office of Global Inclusion for more of these transformation talks as part of our series, as well as updates for our events, programs, and resources, and that we hope you will continue to partner with us in our efforts to advance institutional excellence. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.